rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I thank you for joining me on Monday's edition of End of the Age. Now, I do have a prayer request. Before we start the program, I ask that you all would keep Irvin Baxter in your prayers. He's off sick today, and we all come back from Israel, the Israel trip, our tour that we take every year in the fall, and he got back on Saturday, I got back yesterday, and we all had a little sickness when we came back. So he's off sick today, and I ask that you would keep him in your prayers, and the rest of us as well, so we can get back to business. But we had a wonderful tour. We take, as many of you know, we take 2 tours a year. We take a tour in the spring, we take a tour in the fall, and this year in the fall we just went Israel only. In the spring, we'll be going Israel and Jordan. We'll be tacking Jordan. We'll be going down up to Amman, Jordan, down into Petra, a lot of different places. And so it's a nice trip. I've been there before, and I think you'd really enjoy it. If you'd like to join us on the spring tour, we've got people that have already showed interest in that. And those tours fill up pretty quick. So if you'd like to get a spot on that, call and talk to Jana or Holly. 1-800-ENDTIME, 1-800-363-8463 to join us on our spring tour. And it's always a good time. We got some awesome guides, and you'll learn a lot. If you're a pastor, I've had pastors tell me over the years that they will never preach the same after coming back from an Israeli tour, because the Bible goes from being just black and white letters on a page to in color. And it brings the Bible to life when you go over there. So if you'd like to join us in the spring, call and talk to Jana or Holly, and we'll get you signed up to go with us. I think it's the latter part of April, first part of May, and I think you'd really enjoy it. Now, with that said, because I was just there, and just immersed in the Israeli culture, what I'm going to talk about today is really on the top of my mind, and it's the peace agreement that's going on. Because I was in Bethlehem, I was out in the West Bank, I was stood on the Temple Mount, I went to a lot of these different places. I was up in the north where you can stand in Israel and see Lebanon and Syria, and it's just, once you get immersed in that culture, you can see how the prophecies are coming to pass in such intricate detail. And so I'm going to be talking about some of the efforts for a peace agreement in the Middle East right now. Daniel 9:27 prophesies that the Antichrist in the near future will confirm a covenant with many for a final 7-year period. You understand, Daniel's 70th week. And this peace agreement, or this accord, it's going to be the confirmation of God's covenant with Abraham that Israel would always have a homeland in the promised land. It was promised to him way back in Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. And the fulfillment of this prophecy will be the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And the prophesied agreement, you say, well, how am I going to recognize? Because there's already been peace agreements signed up before now, the Oslo Peace Accords and some different things. How are we going to know? And the Oslo Peace Accord wasn't it. So how are we going to know what the prophesied agreement looks like? Well, the agreement must do 3 things. There's 3 characteristics to it. Number 1, it's going to establish a Palestinian state in Judea, or the modern-day West Bank, out there beyond the 67 line, the original Judea, Samaria. It's called the West Bank today. It's going to establish a Palestinian state out there. Number 2, It's going to allow the Jewish settlers that are presently living in Judea to remain in their homes. Netanyahu said, I'm not going to go in there and jerk them out of their homes like we did in Gaza a few years ago, like Ariel Sharon did in Gaza. So we're going to leave them out there in their homes, and they're going to live as a Jewish minority in the Palestinian state. This peace agreement will allow that to happen. And number three, it's going to place the Temple Mount under an internationally supervised sharing arrangement, allowing for both Jews and Muslims to worship there. And this has already been proposed. It's called the Clinton parameters. And President Obama said, he referred back to the Clinton parameters. When it all boils down to it, when Yasser Arafat, Ehud Barak couldn't come to a decision at Camp David, Clinton said, let's just share it. So it's referred to as the Clinton parameters. And Revelation chapter 11, verse 1 and 2 says that specifically is what's going to happen. That's going to be the solution. They said, measure the Temple Mount, measure the temple, but don't measure the outer court, because it's going to be trodden down of the Gentiles for 42 months, or that final 3.5 years just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So this peace agreement that's coming up, it's going to allow that to be placed under a sharing arrangement. So when you see the prophesied peace agreement, you can know assuredly that the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ has begun. It's very important. It's one of the next events, prophesied events, to occur on God's prophecy timeline. And so that's why we watch it very closely to see what's going on. And you know, because it'll be one of the most significant prophetic fulfillments in the last 2,000 years. And so we watch it like a hawk every day to see really, you know, where we at on this, because there are huge strides being made towards getting this done. Well, during his presidential campaign, Donald Trump said that he would love to work towards a peace agreement between the Palestinians and the Israelis. He actually declared that that would be the ultimate deal. You know, he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. So he was saying that, man, if I could get that peace agreement done, that would be the ultimate deal. And he's actually right. If he can get it done, it would be the ultimate deal, the final deal to be done. So since his inauguration on January 20th, 2017, Trump and his team has been working feverishly, yet quietly, towards this ultimate prize. And because of the under-the-radar activity, most people don't realize what huge strides have been made towards the conclusion of an Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. Now, President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the president's longtime lawyer, Jason Greenblatt, they're the key players in the efforts to negotiate a peace agreement. And they have been traveling back and forth all over the Middle East to many of the Arab countries besides Israel to get, which obviously Israel's not an Arab country, but I'm saying many of the Arab countries around there to negotiate a regional peace agreement. Not like the previous administrations, with just the Palestinians and the Israelis, but a regional agreement to bring everybody together, and that would bring the Palestinians along for the ride. Well, let's talk about Saudi Arabia real quick. Let's just focus on them in this regional agreement, the grand scheme of things. Let's step back and look at the big picture here, and let's talk about Saudi Arabia, because at the end of October, President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner, made an unannounced visit to Saudi Arabia, which was his third trip to that country this year. So you say, well, Dave, why is it significant to the Middle East peace agreement that Jared Kushner, which is on Trump's peace agreement, his team, why is it significant that he would go to Saudi Arabia 3 times? Well, remember the regional peace agreement that they're trying to get signed. So let me focus right in on Saudi Arabia and what's happened since this initiative, the peace initiative that's happened since Trump took office. On February 21st and 22nd, a Saudi spy chief visited Israel and Ramallah. The director of Saudi Arabia's General Intelligence Agency, Khalid bin Ali al-Hamadin, paid a surprise visit to Ramallah and Jerusalem on Tuesday and Wednesday. This was February 21st and 22nd, and neither Palestinian nor Israeli officials did confirm that the visit even took place, but it did. That was in Debka file back in February. Then on February 27th, 2017, Israel secretly was developing ties with Arab countries. This is something that hasn't been done to many of these countries before. And the Trump team is playing a huge role in all of this. So the Israeli intelligence minister, Israel Katz, said, yes, there is cooperation between Israel and these Arab countries, which cannot be discussed in detail. And he said that this cooperation is going to be significantly upgraded because the U.S. is going to lead it. So that was from the Jerusalem Post all the way back in February. So actually, Trump had already started to make moves before he was ever in office. And then on March 8th of this year, Netanyahu said that there was a normalization with Arab states, that it was possible, or this regional agreement that they were talking about. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, this was back in March, that Israel had many other countries in the Middle East share a growing interest in the facing threat of Iran. So they were talking to these Arab nations, these Sunni Arab nations, and they realized that along with Israel, that the Iranian nuclear threat was affecting them as well, because all of these Arab nations were Sunni and Iran was a Shia Muslim nation. And so there had been conflict for years over that, and they have come under threat of Iran as well. And so he said that if Israel acts wisely, that the cooperation will lead to a normalization or a regional agreement and to the development of a new and useful routes for diplomatic initiatives with the Palestinians. So remember, we're talking about a regional agreement that would encompass all these other, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, many different nations. And they said it would bring along the Palestinians with them. That was back in Debka file back in March. Then on March 14th, the Saudi deputy crown prince came to meet Trump at the White House. So you see how Trump's working behind the scenes to get this regional agreement done. That was from Debka file in March. Then at the end of March, March 29th, the Arab leaders discussed the plan for an Arab-Israeli peace. So even though, Trump was working kind of quietly behind the scenes, he knows exactly what he's trying to do. So the Arab rulers quietly discussed offstage a proposal. They weren't announcing this to the world, but they discussed offstage a proposal brought by Saudi King Salman and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to embark on steps destined to lead to peaceful relations between the moderate Arab regimes and Israel, and really exponentially to a resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. That was from Debka file in March of this year. And then a couple days later, on March 30th, the Arab summit leaders endorsed a two-state solution. So the Arab summit leaders endorsed the two states while for the first time omitting to define future Israeli borders. So they're moving closer and closer towards this Israeli peace agreement that they would like to get done, or that Trump has been pushing for, in respect of the ongoing U.S., Saudi, Egyptian initiative to promote an Arab-Israeli peace. That was Debka file on March 30th. Then jump forward a couple months to May 21st, 2017. President Trump spoke to over 50 Arab leaders in Saudi Arabia. And then in his first foreign trip as president, President Trump arrived in Saudi Arabia to a royal welcome. He spoke there to a summit of over 50 Sunni Muslim leaders, challenging them to establish a coalition to fight terrorism. He understood well that they were against Iran and in a threat from Iran's nuclear program, and to support a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians. He's been looking at this regional agreement from the get-go. And that was from the Hill on back in May. Then on May 22nd, President flies directly from Saudi Arabia to Israel. And it was a practice that was previously not allowed. But Trump thinks outside the box. He's trying to get a peace agreement. He's looked at this whole thing for years. And so he flew straight from Saudi Arabia into Israel. That was from the Washington Post at the end of May. And then May 25th, the regional peace comes before the Israeli-Palestinian deal. They were already talking about this. The PA officials said that Trump proposed switching the order of the peace process. The report claims that Trump proposed a plan based on the Arab Peace Initiative. Now, you realize up to this point that America has tried to pull the Palestinians and the Israelis to the peace agreement, to the peace negotiating tables, and said, hey, you know, this is how it's going to be. You guys are going to negotiate and we're going to get it done. It hasn't worked. So Trump said, well, I'm going to kind of propose a plan based on the Arab Peace Initiative. I'm going to bring all the region together with priority given to a regional peace before the Israeli-PA issue. So it was very important that he's trying a whole new thing that's never been tried before. It's very important because he could actually get it done. That was from the Israeli National News in May. Then in June 20th, 2017, the Arab states offer to normalize relations with Israel before the peace is achieved. So you're talking about a regional agreement still. And they're keeping on this same track. And a number of Arab states offered to normalize relations with Israel, which is unheard of. And it was ahead of the planned peace talks between Israel and the Palestinian Authority. That was in June by the Israel National News. Now, what do we know from all this? What we're tracking along here, and this is just Saudi Arabia. Trump and his team went to many different regions. I just wanted to focus on Saudi Arabia for the topic of my program here, because I'm going to get to something, an article that I want to cover with you about Saudi Arabia here in just a second. So what do we know? Well, we know that negotiations have proceeded on a weekly basis and many times daily since President Trump took office. Number two, we also know that several key Arab nations are now prepared to join in making peace with Israel, which up to this point has been a no. Haven't been, not willing to come this far. And since doing so, it's going to provide them with protection from Iran by the U.S.-Israeli alliance. And this is one of Trump's huge leverage bars in this whole regional agreement, because he realizes that Iran is trying to really surround Israel and take over the Middle East. And they realize that if they get nuclear weapons, that they can pretty much do what they want. And so, especially with these Sunni Arab nations like Saudi Arabia, and so consequently, Trump realizes this. And so Saudi Arabia they're willing to say, hey, we've got to get a deal done here. We've got to get something done, because we need the protection of the U.S. and Israel. We've got to have that alliance. So they're willing to come into peace negotiations like they never have before, because there's a whole new Middle East situation developing. And number three, we know that the talks between Kushner and Greenblatt and Netanyahu and Abbas, they're very far advanced. Both Abbas and Netanyahu have indicated willingness to accept significant land swaps in order to achieve new borders that would be accepted by both sides. So you see how far we are into this when you've got the leaders of the Palestinian Authority and Israel saying, look, we're willing to make land swaps. Let's get this thing done. And this is unprecedented. And so number four, we also know that the final status issues, such as refugees and prisoners, those have already been negotiated. That's all done. And number 5, we know that Greenblatt is pushing for pledges from both Abbas and Netanyahu to have attended a peace summit. He was trying to get that done back in September. It didn't come to fruition, but they were already pushing back then to try to get a summit. And that didn't come to fruition because they said we need a little more time to get the peace deal, really our plan, ironed out. And we know it'll probably come in a few months now. And number 6, we also know that, and really finally, we know that President Trump tweeted back on July 2nd, that he said he spoke yesterday with the King of the Saudi Arabia about peace in the Middle East, and that very interesting things are happening. So you see how Saudi Arabia has played a part in tracking. They're very huge because they can help bring the Palestinians into a peace agreement. That's this regional agreement that they're trying to get done. Now, at the end of October, this is where I'm bringing you up to today, just a week or two ago, at the end of October, Jared Kushner made an unannounced or a secretive visit to Saudi Arabia again, which was his 3rd trip to that country this year. And now, look what happened. Israel National News reports that the Saudis that told Abbas to accept the Trump peace plan or to resign. Last week, Saudi Arabia ordered the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, which some people are denying this, but this comes from Israel National News, that the Saudi Authority told President Mahmoud Abbas to either accept the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal being put together by the Trump administration or to resign. This was according to an Israeli report Sunday. Now, you remember the track of Saudi Arabia all the way down through. When Trump got in office, he immediately started sending his guys to Saudi Arabia, and then he went there and visited in his first trip overseas. Then flew from there to Israel. See how important Saudi Arabia is, because he knows they're very key in getting the Palestinians. Now, after all that, just a couple weeks ago, Kushner goes over there secretly and meets with them. And then Sunday, the Saudis tell Abbas, you either comply with this peace agreement, play ball, or resign. And the Trump administration has begun drafting an Israeli-Palestinian peace proposal based on the 2-state solution. And the officials and an analyst quoted that in the New York Times this Saturday. And a senior White House official said that the plan would attempt to tackle controversial issues, such as the status of Jerusalem, which is really the crux of everything, and West Bank settlements. Abbas was called unexpectedly to Riyadh 6 days ago by the office of the powerful Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, and there, in addition to being told to accept Trump's peace plan, or basically quit, he was ordered to keep away from the Iranian influence, according to the report on Israel's Channel 10. And because Abbas had been working with some terrorist organizations that had been getting involved with Iran. And so the Saudis said, we're done with that. You can't do that anymore. And so Abbas has kind of reneged on some of the efforts that he was making in that direction. So, Middle East peace. Remember the prophecy. Daniel 9:27, that the Antichrist would confirm a covenant or sign a peace agreement with many for a final 7-year period. Will there be a peace agreement between the Israelis and the Palestinians? Absolutely. It's prophesied in the Bible. And the prophecies always come to pass. Every single time. There's not one prophecy that is supposed to have occurred up to this point that hasn't come to pass in intricate detail. And so we know that the prophecies that are just ahead of us, they'll come to pass in the same way. So there's no chance that there won't be a peace agreement. So has the time for that peace agreement arrived? Well, that's what we don't know for sure. It is the next event to occur on one of the next events to occur on God's prophetic timeline. But will this Trump's initiative be the one that brings it to fruition? Well, we can really say that all the pieces of the puzzle seem to be lining up. And after following Middle East events for, Irvin's followed them for 50 years now, we've never seen conditions as favorable for an agreement as they are right now. Because, the previous administrations for several decades now, 3 decades, have tried to just bring Israel and the Palestinians to the negotiating table. And they'll get right down to some certain, like the Temple Mount or something, and they say, no, and they've just walked away, and there's nothing they could really do. But now when you bring all of the whole region together, the Palestinians simply won't be able to walk away. Because all Trump has to say is, well, I'd like to protect you from Iran, but if you guys don't want to play ball here, I don't know what I can do. It's a huge leveraging tool that he has. And he wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. He understands in negotiations you need leverage. And he's got some huge leveraging power behind him right now. Now, we don't know if this agreement's going to be the one. However, we're not going to be able to predict with certainty until it happens. Remember the 3 characteristics that I mentioned earlier in the program. How we're going to know whether it's the peace deal. Trump could get a peace agreement signed, let's say tomorrow. And if it doesn't have those 3 characteristics, it's not the one. So you got to have those 3 characteristics that I mentioned. And we know for certain that when a Palestinian-Israeli peace agreement is reached, which creates that, remember, that's the Palestinian state in the West Bank, places the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement between the Muslims and Jews, and allows the Jews to build their 3rd temple on their allotted area of the Temple Mount. This is the prophesied agreement that will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ to this earth. So folks, we are living it in prophesied the end times right now as we speak. We can prove that conclusively.
Are you certain where you will spend eternity? The Truth Seeker package will give you a deeper understanding of the Bible and brings clarity to salvation. Available for a limited time only, the Truth Seeker package is made up of 22 lessons, each specifically designed to take your spiritual growth to the next level and to deepen your relationship with God. Join Irvin Baxter on this amazing journey through the Scriptures, revealing the uncompromising truth of the Bible. For a limited time, order the Truth Seeker package for your gift of $100 or more. Just call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or visit endtime.com today. The Truth Seeker package, taking the filters off of traditional religion, experiencing the Word in its purest form.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Order this brand new book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
Well, I do want to tell you, before I jump back into the Middle East piece, I want to give you kind of an update on our tour we just came back from. Many of you are interested in that, and I'm sure Irvin has kept you up to date with what the goings on of the tour. But I wanted to tell you some highlights that I had just quickly. We had a wonderful baptism in the Jordan River. We baptized 35 people. And what an awesome experience that was. We had an awesome time in the upper room and a great spiritual experience. A move of God came through there in the upper room where the Holy Ghost was poured out in Acts chapter 2 originally. And then we had the prophecy conference in the bottom of the Cloud building where our Jerusalem Prophecy College is located. And the next day we had 17 new students in the Prophecy College. And so what an awesome experience. I mean, that's a smashing success. We've had we used to have a guide there, one of our guides in Israel, that said, "Oh, no, you know, the Jewish people don't want to hear this stuff. You guys are wasting your time." And the first time we ever had a prophecy conference there, he said, nobody's going to show up. And we had 250 people show up. And our guide sat there with his jaw dropped open like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe this." And so just the fact that some secular people may not want to hear it, there are people that are very interested, and those are the ones we're looking for. People with a sincere heart that want to hear the Word of God, and many of them have attended our Jerusalem Prophecy College over the years. So the tour was really, even though we had some sickness on the tour and things like that, we really had an awesome tour this time, and people went back with changed lives, which is the goal. That's the goal. If we're not changing people's lives, helping them to better their relationship with the Lord and different things, then we're wasting our time. But the fact of the matter is that we truly love people. We're trying to help people. And when we go on these tours, yeah, we want them to see the Holy Land and experience that. But at the end of the day, we're trying to help them have a closer relationship with Jesus Christ. That's our goal. And I believe a lot of people came away from the trip with that. And again, if you'd like to join us on our spring tour, we'd love to have you. It's an awesome experience. And we only take a couple buses. And so they fill up real quick, but it's really cool because it's a lot of intimate time with Irvin Baxter. He goes back and forth from bus to bus every other day. He'll spend time with you. He travels with us. He just don't show up to specific sites like the tomb or the Temple Mount. He travels with us the whole time. So you get to spend the whole time with him. And it's an awesome experience. And you learn so much from him because we'll travel and tour all day. And then we'll have dinner at night. And then we'll teach after that. So we cram as much as we can in the tour. And we tell people, look, you can go on vacation when you get home. We're going to do as much as we can while we're over here because some people save up their whole life just to go one time to Israel. And we want them to get the full experience of it. So over the years, we've cut out things you don't want to do, and we've added in things that many tours don't even go on. But they're of such prophetic significance that we can't skip them. So we've got to go. So I just wanted to give you some highlights of from my perspective of the tour. What a great tour. And of course, I've been on many of them, and every one has been great, in my opinion, because people's lives have been changed. And I've had the best thing I've ever had is pastors that will say, I was raised my whole life in the church, and I thought this whole place was set up one way, but it's totally different now that I'm here. All of my stories have to change now. Because I was teaching them from one perspective, and having seen it, I'll never preach the same again. And what a rewarding experience to be in on that. So if you'd like to join us in the spring, call Jan or Holly and go with us. What a great time. And it's really great weather. It's really, you just have a blast. Be a life-changing experience. And you know, we may have a testimony sometime of that because it would be awesome. Okay, so let's get back. The Middle East peace agreement. So let me give you an agreement update because I just talked to you about the regional agreement and many different things that are going on with the Saudi Arabia and many of the different places. They're under fear of Iran, so they're willing to play ball with the United States and Israel now because they need their protection. Do you see the difference in past administrations and what's going on right now? Well, now what's happened is I want to give you a peace agreement update. What's going on with the Trump's team? Well, Israel National News reports that Donald Trump's team is drafting a peace plan. That's where we're at. Donald Trump and his advisors, they've begun developing their own concrete blueprint to end the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The New York Times reported this just Saturday. And according to their report, the plan is intended to go beyond previous frameworks offered by the American government or the past administrations in pursuit of what the president calls, many of you have heard this, he says it's the ultimate deal. After really 10 months now of educating themselves, they didn't just go plowing in there and said, okay, you guys are coming to the negotiating table whether you want to or not. That would have been kind of dumb, for lack of a better word. But they went in and they've been on a 10-month exploratory fact-finding mission, and they've been educating themselves on the complexities of really the world's most intractable dispute. And the White House officials have said that Trump's team has moved in a new phase of its venture in hopes of transforming what it has learned into tangible steps to end a stalemate that has frustrated even presidents with more experience in the region than Trump. Now, according to the New York Times, Trump's team has collected non-papers exploring various issues related to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And officials said that they expected to address such perennial dividing points as the status of Jerusalem, which, like I said, it's what it all boils down to, Jerusalem. Israel is never going to give up Jerusalem. That's why it's only going to be an interim agreement. They're only going to, the Bible says they'll sign a 7-year agreement. It's not a permanent agreement because Israel's never going to give up Jerusalem. When I was standing on the Temple Mount just a week ago, I was telling people, you realize that, I was telling our bus before we got there, you realize what we're fixing to see. This 35 acres is what the Battle of Armageddon is going to be fought over. And that's why it's only going to be an interim agreement, because Israel's never going to give up the Temple Mount, never going to give up Jerusalem. And the armies, the world armies, are going to come down to Jerusalem to battle to enforce the resolution that the Obama administration just allowed to be passed against Israel in the latter part of December of last year, saying that Israel's occupation in East Jerusalem is really illegal according to international law. Now that's the crux right here. So when they talk about the final status of Jerusalem, that's the most critical issue. And then, of course, the communities in Judea and Samaria, the settlers that live out there now. Well, analysts have said that they anticipated that the plan will be built around the so-called two-state solution. And this is despite the fact that Trump has been non-committal to a Palestinian state up to this point. It doesn't mean he's not for it, but he's negotiating here. He's trying to get something done. Well, we know that there is going to be a Palestinian state created according to Scripture. And so we've spent a lot of, they've said that we've spent a lot of time listening to and engaging with the Israelis, kind of a fact-finding mission, and the Palestinians and key regional leaders over the past few months, really to help reach an enduring peace deal. This comes from Jason Greenblatt, who is the president's chief negotiator. Many of you, if you've been following this stuff, you understand who Jason Greenblatt is. He's basically lived over there pretty much for the first 10 months of Trump's plan. And so, and he's been there multiple times in the first 10 months of Trump's presidency. And he stated that we're not going to put an artificial timeline on the development or presentation of any specific ideas, and we'll also never impose a deal, which the past administrations, they would have loved to impose a deal. Trump said, not going to do that. They said that their goal is to facilitate, not dictate, which is, the previous administrations would love to have dictated it. Obviously, you can see that if you follow this at all. Trump and them have said, not going to do that. We want a lasting agreement to improve the lives of Israelis and Palestinians and security across the region. So here they are. They're bringing that region into it again. because Trump's using those leverage bars that I've talked about. According to the report, Trump's team sees the convergence of factors that make the moment for peace very ripe. And we followed this for years, and a lot of pieces are in place that have never been there before, including an increased willingness, and this is so critical, an increased willingness by the Arab states to finally solve the issue, to refocus attention on Iran, which they consider the bigger threat. So they want to get this peace deal done. And they want to have everybody on board so then we can all turn en masse to this Iran problem. And with that in mind, Egypt is brokering a reconciliation between the Palestinian Authority, Chairman Mahmoud Abbas, and Hamas. And it's a deal that would cement the Palestinian Authority as the representative of the Palestinian people. Because you realize up till now, Hamas has been sitting back and saying, we're never going to negotiate with Israel. We need to drive them off into the sea. The Palestinians haven't been able to really negotiate like maybe they would have. But now, if Egypt can get their deal done, then that would allow the Palestinians to really become the final negotiators and maybe have a final say. So Saudi Arabia summoned Abbas to Riyadh to reinforce the importance of the deal. And then you heard what the Israeli National News, or the Times of Israel, just said that Saudi Arabia told Abbas, you're going to do this, you're going to play ball, you're going to accept it, or you might as well resign. Now that's very significant. That's never been done before. And the 4-member team drafting the plan includes Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor, Greenblatt, Dina Powell, who is a deputy national secretary advisor, and then David Friedman, who's the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Those are the four that are drafting the agreement. They are consulting with David Blum, who is the consul general in Jerusalem, and others from the State Department and the National Security Council. But those 4 are the ones that are coming up with the blueprint. Now, you realize we're talking about a blueprint deal that if it was to get done just at first part of next year, maybe mid next year, that would start the and they get it signed, and it has those 3 characteristics we talked about, that could start the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. You understand the gravity of the situation here. And I'm not trying to sensationalize anything. I'm telling you, if this is the blueprint they're coming up with, that if it were to get done, it could begin the final 7 years just in the near future.
Turn your scriptures from black and white into color. Experience the footsteps of Jesus. Understand Bible prophecy that is coming to pass right now. Join Irvin and Judy Baxter and the Endtime team this spring 2018 for a life-changing trip to Israel and Jordan. Mark your calendar for April 26th through May 11th for this amazing journey. Call 1-800-ENDTIME, that's 1-800-363-8463, and press 2, or go to endtime.com/Israel-tour to receive your information today.
Endtime survives on the goodness of God, product sales, and donations from our partners. If you find Endtime to be a blessing to your life, consider us in your year-end giving for 2017. Our Endtime team cannot reach the world alone, but with our partners and the God we serve, nothing is impossible. To be a part of this great cause, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-63-8463, or visit endtime.com/give.
So I want to continue on and try to get finished with my Middle East peace update, the blueprint that they're coming up with before I leave you today. The officials said that the effort may take until early next year, which is that's what, 2 months away, 2-3 months away. The team has drawn praise from across the spectrum. They said that we do believe this is a historic opportunity, and we will spare no effort to support President Trump's investment in a better future. That comes from Hussam Zamlat, the Palestinian Authority's envoy to Washington. Now I didn't say the Israeli envoy. I said the Palestinians' envoy, which hasn't wanted to play ball up to this point. And this was said in an interview. During a trip to London this month, Netanyahu also said, according to the report, that they're definitely trying to think out of the box. They're all trying to get something done here, because Netanyahu realizes this regional agreement will definitely put some pressure on him as well. Some analysts quoted by the Times said they believe that Trump's plan may come with confidence-building provisions that each side they'll already have agreed to. So they've been going over there, been talking to them, and they know what they want to get done. They're setting up this blueprint agreement, but they've already talked to them and said, hey, if this was in agreement, would you agree to it? And they say, yeah. And then they would go back and come back and say, well, if we had this in a future agreement, would you agree to that? So they're saying many of these provisions have already been agreed to. So when they lay the blueprint out there, it's not like they haven't done their homework. A true negotiator like Trump would never do that. You always realize when you go into a business meeting, many of you realize this, you normally would never ask a question that you don't really kind of already know the answer to. And Trump knows this. So he sent his team over there. They've almost lived over there for 10 months now, asking the specific questions. What about the Temple Mount? What about Jerusalem? What about this? The final status? What about protectable borders? And they know what they've agreed to. What about this land swap? We'll give you this if we can get this. A lot of these provisions, they've already been agreed to. So when they go to the negotiating table, they can say, hey, we talked about that back in March. You guys agreed to it. In June, remember, we talked about this. You guys already agreed to that. You see how smart they are in trying to get this thing done? And that's why we're seeing things we've never seen before. Some of this is unprecedented in the tactics that they're using to get this peace agreement done. Now, for Israel, it could include limited construction. Israel's might have to cut back. And it's possible that they will. It could include limited construction to current blocks without taking new land, recommitting to a two-state solution, which Netanyahu has said in the past that he would be willing to do, and redesignated as small part of Judea and Samaria to give Palestinians more control. Now, for the Palestinian Authority, the analysts said that the plan could include resuming full security cooperation with Israel and holding off seeking further international recognition and ending payments to family of imprisoned terrorists. Now, the Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Jordan, they could add their own commitments as well. They could offer commitments to Palestinians and to Israel to try to get the thing done, like overflights by Israel passenger planes to fly over Saudi Arabia and some of them, that would be extremely important to Israel. International flights, and then visas for business people and telecommunication links. So these people are willing to go to great lengths to get a peace deal done. And that's what the Trump administration has been doing for the last 10 months plus, is they've been going over there and they've been saying, hey, what about these telecommunications? What about, how about letting Israel fly over your airspace? I mean, come on. And, because the 800-pound gorilla really in the room is Iran. They understand that Iran is trying to get nuclear weapons for all they're worth. And that's the 800-pound gorilla in the living room. Because Iran would love to drive Israel off into the sea. And so consequently, Donald Trump has looked at the whole thing for years now. And he's come along and he's sent his guys over there. He's been talking to them. Some of the provisions are already been agreed to and said, hey, here's what we can do to get the thing done. And they're coming up with agreement. Now that's an update as of this weekend as to what's going on with the Trump thing, with the peace agreement. And they're writing up a blueprint, and they're going to come out with it. It appears just after the 1st of next year. And we'll see whether it has the characteristics of, placing the Temple Mount under a sharing arrangement. And allowing creating a two-state solution and allowing the Israelis, the settlers, to live out there under Palestinian jurisdiction, setting final borders of the nation of Israel with protectable borders, not 8 or 9 miles wide at the waist. They could never protect that. Matter of fact, Israel is such a small nation. If you've never been there, you can't really grasp the situation. Because you go to a place in the north, it's Mount Carmel, where the prophet Elijah, he went against the prophets of Baal and the prophets of the grove. And you stand up there where he did that, where the Lord come down and consumed his sacrifice. You stand up there on the mountain, and you can actually see the Mediterranean Sea, and you can see the Moab Mountains. So you can see all the way across the whole of Israel right there. So until you've been there and experienced that, you can't understand how small of an area we're dealing with. Israel, from top to bottom, I think is 250 miles. And at the widest, I think it's like 50 or 60 miles wide. So it's like very, very, very small. I think it's like the size of Rhode Island. And to say, well, we're going to give up a big portion of that to a Palestinian state. I mean, you wonder why Netanyahu's been fighting and fighting and fighting against this the whole time. He wants peace, but he said, look, we've got to have defensible borders. And so that's one of the main things that have played into it, obviously, and the status of Jerusalem. Who controls Jerusalem? Israel's going to control that all the way to the Battle of Armageddon. And then the Bible says half of the city will be captured. But up to that point, Israel's going to control the entire city all the way through to the end. So it's very important. Now, I wanted to give you an update on the Middle East peace agreement. What's going on? They're developing a blueprint right now, and the report from the Times of Israel, Saudi Arabia has just told Abbas, you either play ball, agree to this agreement, agree to this peace agreement they're coming up with, or you might as well go ahead and resign. That comes from the Times of Israel. Now, there's your peace agreement update. Now, another thing I wanted to talk to you about just before the end of the program, I-24 News reports that Trump wrote a thank you letter to Netanyahu for supporting his UN speech. And it said that I want to go over a real key element of the letter that he wrote him. The U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his gratitude in a letter to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for strongly supporting his speech at this year's United Nations General Assembly gathering in September. And this comes from Israel's Channel 10. Well, it stated that Trump said, I thank you for the support and the reinforcement that you gave from my speech. And then this is the key statement that I want you to realize from Trump. He wrote this letter to Netanyahu. He said, together we will act against Iran. Now, in the news, we could just slide over that and say, well, hey, together we're going to stand against Iran. Do you understand what Trump is saying? Trump is saying that we're not going to allow Iran to attack you. We're not going to allow Iran in the region, any further in the region, because Israel knows that in the north, Iran's already knocking at their door. And they're already right on the border in the north. And Trump is saying, look, together we will act against Iran. Israel, I'm going to be your partner in this all the way to the end. And I'm not going to allow you to go it alone. So why did I want to bring this up? Because of many things that are going on right now with the U.S. and Israel. I was just there. You can feel the Israelis they feel much more secure with Donald Trump in the White House than they did with President Obama. I'm just being honest here. I was there, and from the talk we hear on the ground with many of them, they feel very secure that America is in the position we're at now rather than the previous administration. They didn't feel very secure. They didn't feel very protected under the Obama administration, especially what happened with the resolution that we allowed to be passed that said that the settlers out in the West Bank and those even in East Jerusalem were illegally occupying the land according to international law. The Obama administration actually withheld our veto and allowed that to pass, that resolution. And that's actually what will be enforced at the Battle of Armageddon all the way at the end. So Israel was like, they didn't know what to think during the Obama administration. They didn't feel protected at all, or that America was with them totally. But yet, now there's been kind of a breath of fresh air in Israel that says, hey, America's with us all the way to the end. And it's such a fulfillment of prophecy. I could see that in their eyes, that they understand America is going to protect them. Well, we know from the prophecies of the Bible, especially Revelation chapter 12, the Bible, Revelation 12:14, that Israel's carried away on the wings of a great eagle, where she is nourished in her place, which is Israel, for time, times, and half a time, which is that final 3.5 year period. And when I saw this today, that Trump told Netanyahu in this letter recently, thanking him for supporting him in his speech at the General Assembly in the United Nations. And he said, just this one line, he said, together we will act against Iran. I'm not going to leave you hanging out there, Netanyahu. And Netanyahu said, the report said that Netanyahu shared the letter with his weekly cabinet meeting just yesterday. And shortly after Trump's speech, Netanyahu said it was one of the most praiseworthy speeches that he had ever heard at the UN. He said, in over 30 years in my experience with the United Nations, I've never heard a bolder and more courageous speech. Netanyahu said that President Trump spoke the truth about the great dangers facing our world and issued a powerful call to confront them in order to ensure the future of humanity. Of course, in the speech, Trump referred to the Iran nuclear agreement in 2015 as being one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States ever entered into. And he's absolutely correct. And so consequently, I just having got back from Israel yesterday, talking to our guide and many of the people there, they feel a new level of security with America protecting them and working alongside them, and they are so thankful for that. They're thankful for our nation standing with them, and I always want to stand with Israel. I was so happy about that, and it's a fulfillment of prophecy, that Israel will be carried away on the wings of a great eagle, where she is nourished for that final 3.5 year period, and I could see it, that kind of a resurgence of the United States protecting Israel in the end time, a fulfillment of prophecy.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.